Let's go. Hi, this is Linda Harvey, and here we are with another in our series of videos where we are talking about what is being taught to Ohio children regarding sex education. And today I'm going to bring you some information. This is again based on what Protect Ohio Children found in their records request about what is being taught in Ohio schools. And I'm going to bring you another in these comprehensive sex education curricula. This one is a very common one. You probably heard of it. And if you have, we need your information about specifics because we know this one is being used in Ohio. But before I tell you more about it and where it's being used, let's just review that we have in Ohio an abstinence until marriage sex education law. We've had this since 1999. And despite that is the expected standard for schools to be teaching, and the fact that there are still many, many wonderful abstinence teachers and programs out there, still in way too many schools, they are sneaking in this very obscene and pornographic and very inappropriate, high risk and heartbreaking material that is absolutely pornographic and obscene and has become just more so in the past few years. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the curriculum called Reducing the Risk. And we're going to be talking about the 5th edition. Reducing the Risk has been around for about 25 years, and it has gotten increasingly, it was problematic from the first, but it's way over the top now. It is being used in the Cuyahoga County schools and through the state of Ohio, in all juvenile foster care situations. They're teaching using this curriculum. And think about the kinds of kids that might be most vulnerable to this curriculum as you're listening to it. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, reducing the risk is what we're talking about. And as we have mentioned before, we are analyzing Reducing the Risk, the 5th edition, based on the 15 harmful elements that are commonly included in the CSE materials. And these 15 harmful elements are are part of the Protect Child Health Coalition's analysis of 15 harmful elements. And this particular curriculum gets 15 out of 15. They are one of the most damaging curricula that are out there. It is designed for kids ages 14 to 18, and it is also sometimes found in middle schools and taught to children as young as 12. Now, they will claim that this is abstinence-based. You hear the term abstinence throughout this material. It's incredibly deceptive, as you will see. So about half of the states in the country are using this curriculum in some fashion. And again, it's being taught now in the state of Ohio. So if you find out that it's being taught in your school district, we would really like to know that, because this is a very damaging curriculum. Let's look at number 1 on the 15 harmful elements. That in a general way, it sexualizes kids. What they will do in this curriculum, like they do in so many of the others, is to use role-playing activities, which draws kids into playing out very detailed and explicit scenarios that they would most often never be involved in. So in this case, the first one is Lee and Lee have been going out for 3 months. What you see is the use of the gender-neutral language that desensitizes kids to the idea that there might be same-sex relationships. So they are getting closer to having sex, normalizing all of this. So what we see as we go on with this first example. I'm not going to read all of this again because some of this is very way too detailed. But what they start not just normalizing sexual behavior among kids, they normalize things like beginning to have much more contact sexually, getting into private situations, and that's a normal thing that kids will be doing. Also drinking, and they just drop that in there. They don't do a lot of analysis of why that is often a contributor. But here's Michael was dating Jaden and only having sex with her. Then one night at a party, he drank too much and had sex with someone else. After that, he continued to only have sex with Jaden. Now, rather than stopping right there and the teacher saying, Michael shouldn't be having sex with Jaden or anyone, no, they go on and analyze this. Is this serial or overlapping? In other words, their kids are learning things like you can have serial relationships that are sexual or overlapping, and that's promiscuity. They're normalizing all of this. Then they do a lot of discussion of condoms, and you will see this as we go on through here. As we go on and you continue to read. The other thing they do is to, excuse me, they talk about younger and younger children and normalizing this. So, for instance, here's one that talks about the very young children. The HPV vaccine is recommended for girls and boys ages 11 and 12 because the shots work best when given before a person has sex. So 13-year-olds are being expected to think of sex as a normal part of their lives here. That's what it sounds like. You go on through this scenario here. Again, these kids are drawn into all of these role plays, and think of the impression kids are getting. They will feel weird after a lot of this if they're not having sex. I think that's part of the goal. The party is at a friend's house and the parents are gone. A lot of the kids are getting high, and some couples are leaving maybe to have sex. There we go again. How about this one? Imagine you have a younger sister who is 12 years old. She tells you she wants to have sex with her boyfriend. What do you tell her? I think is what they're going to say. This curriculum will be advising people to advise younger siblings in situations like this, or friends, that you have two choices. You can be abstinent, or you can have protected sex, and make sure you have that condom with you if you are going to have protected sex. They will make those two things equivalent. Abstinence is the same as protected sex. But 12 years old, your 12-year-old should be being told, your sister, don't have sex with anyone. Okay, number 2, teaches children to consent to sex. And again, we've gone through this before, the problem with consent. Negotiating sexual encounters is not something any minor-aged child should be doing. This is for adults, and it's for marriage, again, if we're following the standard in Ohio. But what reducing the risk, this curriculum will tell kids, is that, and tell in the teacher's manual, they're stressing to the teacher, the role plays are an essential and powerful part of reducing the risk. At first, students may be hesitant about their performances, but they soon begin to enjoy these opportunities and use them to great advantage. Teachers will help students by continuing to encourage them to practice their interpersonal skills and to practice effectively saying no to sex or to unprotected sex. And it goes on from there, and then talks about the two-way nature of consent. Kids are not just taught to say no, and of course, kids should be told, you do not have to submit to rape or sexual assault or be coerced into sex, of course. But what these curricula are doing is they're using this as an opportunity to teach kids that they have the right to say yes, and here's how to do it, and to negotiate your boundaries, and so on. They teach, all through this, what you get the idea of is that they're teaching children to be to be other animals, basically, or robots. as if there's no emotions, there will be no heartbreak, there will be no disease, there's no risk in any of this, that this is normal and that this is normal. This is not normal. This is high risk, and this is sexualizing children and grooming them and setting them up for being exploited or being those who abuse or use other people for sex. That's not what we want out of our children. And that is not the high character that we want to develop. Okay, number 3, here's another of the measures of the harmful elements. Promotes anal and oral sex. There is so much here, I'm not even going to read it. It is so detailed, but once again, like some of the other curricula do, they draw an equivalence between vaginal, oral, and anal sex. And as if you're going to be having all of these, and they're all perfectly manageable. They're not perfectly manageable. When I first began to look at reducing the risk 20 years ago, or anal sex was not included in the way it is now. And I think back then, the public health people were still on board with the idea that you're never going to recommend anal sex on a broad basis to anyone, because we know that anal sex is involved in not just disease, but in injury. But no, now they're well on board with vaginal, anal, and oral sex as if these are all equivalent and they can all be managed. But this is such a betrayal of our kids. Again, they're all supposed to be managed with a condom. And part of the reason they have all these various behaviors is because this curricula is well on board with promoting homosexual and bisexual behavior. The LGBT community has pushed for this more obscene and graphic comprehensive sex education. That's why we have it include them as well as Planned Parenthood and the abortion providers. They want the abortion business that this will give them as well when these condoms and contraceptives fail. But the promotion of homosexual and bisexual behavior is a part of all of this. And you can see that they will put the kids in the role-playing situations where they will be thinking of another classmate, interacting with them in this role-playing situation. It can lead to a lot of teasing, cyberbullying later. These are very graphic and humiliating, frankly, embarrassing situations that they want to break down the barriers of inhibition of these kids, and they're trying to do it through this curriculum. And it's one more way that they will try to sexualize kids early. And I'm not sure, we're never quite sure of what in the world would make people do this. What would make a teacher go into this business and begin to do that? But they are doing it, and it's really tragic. So hang on a second. The other thing they will do is one of the other 15 harmful elements that not all the curricula will blatantly do, but this one does, is promoting sexual pleasure right out. I mean, it's as if we're paying our schools to become sex clinics for our children. Look at what they're saying. Abstaining may ultimately help people be better lovers. It allows them to explore a wide range of ways to express love and sexual feelings. What they're saying there is, we want you to do all of the outer course and the pre-sexual intercourse behaviors and get very familiar with all of those. And we're selling you on this. What they'll also do is go into the anatomy of male and female anatomy involving pleasure in way too much detail for this age group. This is for marriage. This should not be part of any sexual curriculum. And are most parents comfortable if they knew they were sending their children into class that day to learn about sexual pleasure? I think not. They also promote masturbation. That's another of the harmful elements. And when you promote masturbation right out and normalize it, what you're doing is encouraging children to become more and more sexual. And when you become more sexual, then it leads into all these other behaviors that will follow on. Promotes condom use in great detail, very inappropriately. We have this curriculum will use a wooden penis model to demonstrate the use of the condom. The teacher will do it. Sometimes they will have the students do that as well. Can you imagine being a 14-year-old girl who's a little bit shy anyway, and you're in a mixed sex class, and the teacher is telling you in precise detail, just read some of this, exactly about condoms, and you are not even comfortable going on a date yet, as many 14-year-olds are not. And again, this is used for younger kids as well. But even if you are one of those kids who is already sexually active, shouldn't somebody be saying to you, stop, this is high risk. You're going to end up with an STD or you're going to end up pregnant. They're not even beginning to do that. They are normalizing all of it. They also say things like, what would be the most romantic way to use the condom? What would you do to save the evening if it becomes embarrassing? It's embarrassing because you're way too young to be doing this, and this is for marriage. I mean, there's some real obvious things here, but they're wanting this to be romantic, selling these sexual practices to kids. And the other thing that is important to remember when you're looking at all this, first of all, put yourself back in your teenage years and think about how you would react. But one of the other things that happens here is that kids not only begin to believe that this is what the experts are telling me, so the adults must know that this is okay and that this can be managed without all this, without all this risk. But also, if you're one of those kids that doesn't want to do this, what are you going to think? You're going to think you're weird. You're going to think you're the weird person. That's a terrible thing for the average, just blooming adolescent to begin to think. That puts them at all kinds of other kinds of stress that they don't need. It promotes this curriculum. It promotes premature sexual autonomy. So you have the right to decide when you want to have sex. And, what they're trying to do is, again, lead kids into classroom assignments where they have to identify clinics nearby and other resources, again, for when they're ready to have sex. Ask about the confidentiality policies at the clinics. Why would they want to do that? Because they don't want parents to be involved. They want parents to be shut out of any decision-making and knowledge about what kids are doing. And they emphasize this in other parts of the curriculum as well. So they are assigned a shopping information form to visit 2 stores to price condoms. They're assigned visiting or calling a clinic and researching a family planning clinic. They may be the county health department, but most likely they're going to be a Planned Parenthood or other abortion clinic. The way to the clinic assignment requires students to map the route to the clinic. Again, you're perfectly able at age 14 to go ahead and do this. You have the right to do this without your parents knowing. Picture a time in your life when you would be ready to have sex. They want kids to even look ahead in the future and make this decision. This is not a neutral curriculum. They're selling kids on sex. Okay, it also fails to establish in many ways, as we've already shown, abstinence as the expected standard. Again, Ohio law. So here's what they think of as abstinence. And this is why you have to be, as parents, very cognizant of the way they're defining an abstinence curriculum, because they will claim that they're an abstinence curriculum. Here's how they define that. Abstinence means choosing not to do any sexual activity that carries a risk for pregnancy or STD, HIV. Okay, so that opens up the door to all pre-intercourse activities, and they believe that when you cover it with a condom, you basically are protected from pregnancy and STD. So here we go again. The second part of this activity shows how risk changes when people abstain or use protection. Class 2 reminds students that there are only 2 ways to avoid pregnancy and STD: not having sexual intercourse, abstaining, or consistently using protection, as if those are the equivalent. No, using protection or thinking you're going to use protection and then failing to at the last minute, which is often the situation certainly with adolescents and human beings. No, they're not the same. Abstaining is the only way you avoid intercourse. This is risk. You're walking kids into feeling comfortable with risk. You are not reducing the risk unless you say absolutely 100% abstinence. So their whole goal is to avoid unprotected sex. Protected sex is the gold standard here, and it's a lie. They're lying to kids. So all the other details here, the homework assignment, researching prices on prescriptions and so on. But here's the other thing: they begin to continue to normalize that not only are you expected to be having sex behind your parents' back if necessary, but you may have siblings who are also doing the same thing in your family. And as in this scenario, Taylor and Bobby have gone out for a long time, but have never had sex. One day they go to Bobby's sister's apartment. She's in the bedroom with her boyfriend. In the living room, Taylor and Bobby start to kiss and warm up to each other. What can Taylor or Bobby do to avoid sex or unprotected sex? How about they stop doing what they're doing and go home? I mean, where are the adults telling kids what they ought to be doing? Here's Tony and Dylan. Here we have the same sex, appears to be the same sex couple, start to kiss and undress each other. They realize they've forgotten the condom. What can they do to avoid unprotected sex? Get dressed and go home, is what the teacher should be telling them. So it goes on from there. But the situation with the same-sex couple, they're normalizing that all through this curriculum as well, and promoting the transgender ideology. Excuse me. Be sure your reading of the role play allows for inclusivity and does not reinforce one view of gender identity or gender stereotypes. Well, but just by saying that, they've approved of various gender identities. So they're reinforcing one view, that is approving of somebody supposedly changing gender. The problem with that is that this is a lie, and it walks kids into the false idea that you can ever actually change gender, or that you should, when the vast majority of the time, when left alone without medication or without mutilating surgery, by the time an adolescent is an adult, they will be comfortable with the gender of their birth. And of course, this throughout promotes contraception and abortion to children, presents abortion as a safe or even positive option while omitting data on the many potential negative and physical and mental health consequences. All the different types of contraception are outlined. They emphasize condoms because they are quick and easy, supposedly, for kids, but no, they emphasize all the rest of it. Pregnancy risk chart, they give a false idea, false comfort level. You did not become pregnant because you used a latex condom correctly every time you had sex. You can become pregnant even if you use a condom correctly. They need to make sure kids know that. They're giving them a false sense of comfort. And then, of course, all the costs and ways to make this available. Excuse me. Then this also promotes peer-to-peer sex ed and sexual rights advocacy. What they do is they sit down kids in role plays and in groups, small groups, tell them they will develop a role play that addresses one of the steps for the preparation for using condoms and write out a script. the other thing they're going to start doing, in the current environment of um, advocacy of your rights and the focus on racial equality, even, we're beginning to see that the LGBTQ and the abortion rights people are jumping on board all the attention that's being given to that and deciding that they're going to um, piggyback on top of that, and especially to minority students, tell them that it's almost like racism, or flat out it is racism, if you don't have your sexual rights as well. You have a right to sex ed, you have a right to an abortion, you have a right to all these different identities and sexual orientations, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, or they are racists. It's another big con job and a total lie, but expect that you're going to see lots more of that, and kids being manipulated and exploited as a result. Okay, and also, this curriculum also undermines traditional values and beliefs. For instance, at some point in their lives, most people decide they are ready to have sex, but not to become a parent. Well, that means separating sex from marriage and possible parenthood. You know, that's a value that many people have, many faiths have. And telling kids that, oh, it's normal to just go ahead and have sex and prevent parenthood. They are not emphasizing abstinence until marriage. This is so much of this curriculum is, but this one is very much against Ohio law. And not that, back to here, not that it's Ohio law that you have to emphasize traditional values and beliefs, but when you undermine marriage, you're against Ohio law, and that's what they're doing here. And then they undermine parents or parental rights over and over in this curriculum. You do not need a parent's permission to get birth control at a clinic. In almost every state, teens can be tested for HIV without parent permission. Make sure you check ahead of time. Now, why in the world would they need to be telling kids this? And do you think that the parents who are sending their children to school that day know that their kids are going to be told ways to bypass their knowledge or permission in order to get condoms, birth control, or to have an abortion? That's a terribly tragic situation. The only way that's going to change is if parents get involved. And then they go on and they refer children to harmful resources. And as we've talked about before, they will help kids locate a clinic. They will give them web pages on the classroom screen to tell them the local clinics. They will have telephone directories if necessary. They will learn what services are offered at local family planning clinics. Now, today, in addition to abortions and contraception and STD testing, Planned Parenthood and others will allow kids who are gender confused to come in and be given a prescription for medication for an opposite sex hormone and to start on hormone therapy. Yeah, possibly, quite likely, without a parent's knowledge or permission. That is a lifelong health compromising situation. Now, and then here's what we get at the end. Not only are they selling sex to kids, they're enabling the safe use, quote unquote, of injection drugs. What are these people doing? People who use injection drugs should never share needles. If needles or works are shared or reused, and then how to clean them. This is criminal. I mean, I just can't even begin to say how angry it makes me, and I'm sure it makes you the same way. This is really, really wrong in so many ways. So I will stop sharing my screen in just a second here. Let me take another drink of water. Okay. So what you're seeing, friends, is heartbreaking. It's a betrayal of the first order. If you know of reducing the risk and how it's being used in Ohio schools, please let us know. And please let us know of your experience in going to the school boards, because you need to be doing that too, and telling them this is not abstinence, this is not healthy for our children. It not only exposes them to health risks, the possibility of pregnancy, and then the temptation for an abortion, but heartbreak, which is ignored completely by these sex peddlers who are trying to grooming our children with obscene materials. And we should not be allowing that in Ohio schools. Abstinence until marriage is still the best idea. Thanks so much.